Hey everybody, Wednesday afternoon, and it is time for Seminole Sidelines. We're going to talk some Florida State softball here this afternoon, and the Noles got a big one tonight against Oklahoma, the national championship, the series, game one underway between the Noles and the Sooners. I've got Caylan Arnold, former Nole, joining us here, and we are so excited for this show. Caylan, nothing better than Florida State getting to play for it all.
Really nothing. I was so emotional after the game last night, seeing the girls celebrating, seeing the tears and the emotion from Kat and Mac, and then seeing the celebration in the locker room afterwards with the girls and Coach. It was awesome.
And so Florida State knocks off Tennessee. They go a perfect 3-0 to get to the championship series, and now the biggest test of the year, the Oklahoma Sooners riding a 51-game win streak. Couple national championships in a row. They are a dynasty. I mean, this has been incredible, and it's been great for the sport. I think it's raised the profile for the sport, but I think it's time for the Seminoles to knock them off their perch and claim another national championship. Caylan, you played against Oklahoma in a national title series. You've been on this stage. What goes into the days that lead up? Now, I mean, you get the day off on Tuesday. What goes into that as you prepare for the championship?
So, a lot of rest, a lot of recovery, taking care of your body, doing what you need to do if you're sore or tight or any of that. Coffee walks. Coach loves her coffee, and the girls love coffee. So usually they go on a Starbucks walk to take care of that. And then you come back and eat together as a team, do a little bit of film, a little bit of research on the team that you're about to play, come up with a game plan, and then go to bed and get ready, to take it on the next day.
Yeah, it'll be really important for the ladies, I think, to get their rest. They've been able to do that routinely out in OKC, and you and I talked about with Alex Bowers when we did the preview last week about how they changed the format to allow for a little bit of an extra day of rest. And really, before, it was ridiculous, pretty much finishing at midnight, having to be back to play the next day in the early afternoon. And the Seminoles have taken full advantage, right? They've won every game, and so they haven't had to really get pressed with the schedule. They haven't had to play multiple games in the same day. That's been big. And so now you start turning your attention to Oklahoma. Let's talk first, Caylan, before we talk about the Sooners and how Florida State matches up and how the Noles can win, how FSU got here. What has impressed you most about Coach's team as they played Oklahoma State, as they beat Washington, and then beat a really, really good Tennessee team as well?
I think, Coach has done such a fantastic job of, one, pitching by a staff, by a true staff, so utilizing more than just one arm, allowing pitchers like Kat, who have been a catalyst for this program, to get rest and just getting everybody some experience out there, dipping their toes in the water. Also, I think that the atmosphere and environment that Coach creates while the girls are there is so cool. I mean, yes, like you're in Oklahoma City, which is, every softball player's dream, but she brings in just this humility and this gratefulness and like really being present and being where your feet are mindset when the girls show up. That was one of the first things that we did when we got to OKC was she took us out onto the field and she said, just breathe it all in, take it all in, be so grateful and so present. And so I think that that's how the girls have been playing, is just grateful and present and to their left and to the right for one another. And I think that they haven't pressed, they haven't had a lot of pressure and they've just played free. And that's been the difference.
Yeah, I mean, your expertise, Caylan, too, in the circle, the Noles have been so good, right? And it hasn't been just Sandra Cock, who is dialed in on like a Megan King level of just locked and loaded right now. It's like every pitch is exactly where she wants it. She can pitch inside. She can pitch outside. We've talked about how she's more comfortable and dynamic pitching up in the zone, and then the patented, sinker ball and the drop ball that she pitches low in the zone that is so effective. But we'll talk about her because she deserves the praise. She's gotten some help, right? Whether it's a Kenny Reed, a Mac Leonard, they have come in and done the job behind her as well. Florida State's given up just 2 earned runs, 2 runs total in 20 innings pitched as a pitching staff.
It's been amazing to watch and to see the growth of McKenna Reed and even Mac Leonard. I know Mac's a senior, but at the beginning of the year, she really didn't have a whole lot of innings, and then coaches started throwing her a little bit more and a little bit more as the year went on. And a lot of people were surprised that she started last night, but it's funny because I actually called it the day before. I told some of my Vibe teammates, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if she throws Mac tomorrow. And they said, really? You don't think she's going to throw Sandercock? And I said, I mean, she could. But knowing Kocha and knowing how her mind works, I think that she's going to go with Mac. And she did. And it was, a lot of people were shocked, but I wasn't, because I think Mac is a great pitcher. I think that she throws velo, she throws that down ball, and then, bringing in McKenna, who's the complete opposite, velo and that upspin, was really cool to see. And it really messed with the timing and the viewpoint of the Tennessee hitters.
They're going to be important, right, against Oklahoma, right? Like, Sandercock's going to get the heavy share of the innings, but you're going to need someone to steal outs. Who else do you think? Do you think, is this somewhere where a Dubois gets a chance for an inning? I know she hasn't really had her number called yet. Does a royalty get asked to pitch an inning? I don't know. How do you approach this if you're Florida State going forward?
I definitely think that Kocha will use all of the arms again, just like we saw when they played Oklahoma at the very beginning of the season. I don't know if it's going to be the same type of format that we saw, where it was like everybody's throwing a couple innings, or if she'll be a little bit more strategic with it. I definitely think we'll see an Allie Dubois at some point, just because, I mean, that changeup is filthy. It's so filthy. And to be able to just throw her in there for a batter or two, ones that maybe struggle with that off speed, I think would be really, really smart. And then same thing, we might see Mac, definitely going to see Kat, because she's Kat, and then maybe a little bit of McKenna Reed. So I think that Coach is going to be very strategic with it. Coach really, really studies these hitters. She knows what their weaknesses are. So she's going to put the pitcher in that she thinks is going to be the best matchup.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before too, and us on the show as well throughout the regular season. I asked Lonnie this probably after the Clemson series. She joined Seminole Sidelines, and we talked about her pitching philosophy, and she said she's changed it a little bit this season, where she just feels like that's where the game's going, is having numerous arms. And really, if you liken it to baseball, Caylqn, you've called baseball as well. You've been on those broadcasts. In that sport, you have specialists, right? You have lefty specialists, righty specialists, submariners who come in, and they have a job to do. And it's not to be out there for 4 or 5 innings at times. It's just, this is what this matchup dictates, and we feel like this is the arm that gives us the best chance to get these outs. Do you agree with that? That's where softball is headed, where you're going to have more matchup worthy opponents and things like that, where you're going to have to be a little more diligent in the way that you apply a pitching staff?
Definitely. I mean, if you look at even in just the past few years, even when I, was still pitching in college, it was very much like you have, an ace or maybe 1 or 2 aces who are going to take on the majority of the load. That's how I was, it was me and Maddie Moss, my freshman and sophomore year at Tennessee. Junior year, we were able to bring on Ashley Rogers. And then when I transferred, it was me, Kat, and Danielle, and we were kind of a 3-headed monster. So you could see how it slowly started to shift a little bit more towards a staff, whereas years and years and years ago, it was Monica Abbott pitching all the time. It was Kat Osterman pitching all the time, Jenny Finch pitching all the time. And now we don't do that. And I think that it's because the offense has really grown and become so much harder to manage as a pitcher. It is so hard now to be able to face a Tennessee lineup or an Oklahoma lineup that is just full of really, really good hitters 1 through 9. It's almost impossible to go through that lineup 3 times unless you're, Nigeri Kennedy, who is just incredible. I just don't even have words for that. But I think for sure that we're seeing more specialists coming into the game. And I really think that that's one of the main reasons why Florida State has made it this far, has made it to the Champ Series, is because Kocha saw this coming and she adapted to it immediately. And that's why Florida State has been so successful.
Yeah, and so the pitching is going to be important. No doubt about it. Something that's been so impressive, and you and I were chatting about it before we hit the record button and before we went on the show. This team has really responded well, not just all season, but in OKC to momentum, right? Like it feels like the first two games, the Noles struck first, whether it was Edenfield with a bomb in game one, game two against Washington coming out and scoring 2 runs very quickly. And then against Tennessee, they never let the Volunteers feel good about themselves, right? It was like an immediate response from Edenfield with the home run. How important is that going to be against Oklahoma in terms of being able to kind of hang in there as the game ebbs and flows?
It's going to be huge because Oklahoma, if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And that's something that if you want to beat Oklahoma, you have to stop. You have to punch back more than they punch you. And that's what we were talking about. I think it's going to be a boxing match. And whoever punches the hardest and gets the KO is the one that's going to win. And that's something that Oklahoma is very, very good at. They're very good at punching back. And Florida State, we've seen in this World Series and in the Super Regional and in regionals, like in this whole postseason, has been very, very good at punching back. And so that's something that they're going to have to do. Never take their foot off the gas pedal. Never let OU feel good about themselves. Just continue to punch and punch and punch.
The defense as well behind Sandercock, whoever else is in the circle getting the nod, it's going to be important, right? And they've been really good this World Series run. I thought, obviously, the infield has played really well. Muffley, I think, Caylin, they should rename SportsCenter's top 10 Josie Muffley's SportsCenter's top 10. They should just rename the entire list after her. But it hasn't been just Josie, right? Like there's been in the outfield great plays being made. Flaherty with the big tag against Okie State. The list goes on and on of great defensive plays. That coupled with the base running, do you feel like the Noles are going to have to use those two things to their advantage when you're looking at boxes you have to check off to beat in Oklahoma?
Definitely. You can't let Oklahoma get on base. That's where it starts. You can come back from solo shots, those types of things. But when it's a 2-run shot, 3-run shot, that's where they really hurt you. And so you cannot allow Oklahoma to get on base. So defense is going to be huge. That's going to be just absolutely a have to, is to play good defense. Base running as well. Oklahoma is a very good defensive team. And so being aggressive on the base paths, but also being smart, being very, very smart, because they are such a highly skilled defensive team. And Florida State, I think, has done that all year. They've been really, really great on the base paths. We saw the aggression from them last night against Tennessee with Mudge trying to steal home. And I think that just trying to apply as much pressure as you can and seeing if you can make them crack is what's going to play a big part in scoring runs for the Noles.
You feel like 2 runs might be at a premium. I know people talk about Oklahoma's offense, right? And so you would think in the back of your brain that this is going to have to be a shootout. If FSU is going to have a chance at this, they're going to have to outscore Oklahoma's juggernaut offense. But I thought Stanford showed that you can keep their offense at relative bay. I mean, it's impossible you're not shutting out Oklahoma. Like if they don't score a single run, I think something has happened.
Yeah.
They have woken up sick as a lineup.
Yeah.
But, you've got to limit that offense. But I do think that Stanford showed that there's a way to do that. You're going to have to, I think, offensively scrap and claw some runs across. And that's where the base running, taking a third base on a sack, on a fly out to right field, making good reads on ground balls, short game being big for FSU, stealing bases where I think the Noles, that's going to be really interesting. Can Mudge and Flaherty, when they go with Belvi and, of course, Ross, like how do they put pressure on Oklahoma? Because, Caylin, it feels like you look up and Florida State's at first base and there's 2 outs. All of a sudden they're at third and a wild pitch or a ball gets away, a chopper in the infield, and that's a run. And you feel like those will be incredibly critical against an Oklahoma.
I do, because I think Oklahoma, too, has a really great pitching staff. I think Jordy Ball is great. Alex Storako is great. Nicole May is great. So it's going to be probably not as much power, in my opinion. I could be wrong. They could come out and just, be killing the ball. But based off of what we've seen Oklahoma's pitching staff do, I really don't think that it's going to be a whole lot of power hits. I think that Florida State is going to have to be very scrappy and basically just do whatever they can to score a run. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be home run after home run or double after double. It's just scratching runs however they can. And that's what's going to work for them, because I really think that Florida State at heart is just a scrappy team. And when they play that way, it works out well.
Caylqn, where does Florida State have an advantage? Is there one? Is there somewhere you look at and you go, okay, I think if we're, got two teams on a column and we're giving people strengths and weaknesses, this is where Florida State might have a slight edge over Oklahoma?
I think going back to what we talked about previously and the humility and the gratefulness of it, I think Florida State, and we talked about this earlier, very much comes in as the underdog. Nobody thinks that they're going to beat Oklahoma. They want them to, but nobody thinks, that they have like a true shot of winning twice. They may, I 100% think that they can win game one. It's going to be game two that's going to be really hard. Can you beat that team twice that's so good at adjusting? But I think that underdog mentality and just playing free like they've done this whole postseason is what is going to give them an edge over Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma sometimes does press a little bit. And if they do that, if they feel that pressure, that's when Florida State's going to be able to come away with a win. I also think that having Kat Sandercock in the circle is a huge advantage for Florida State, because she's a fifth-year senior and she's been there already, right? She has played this team already in the World Series, in the Champ Series. And so that's a huge advantage, just to have somebody who's already been there. And so and a lot of the girls actually, were a part of the team when we did play against Oklahoma in 2021 in the Champ Series. So it's not anything new for them. And so I think that if they just play Florida State softball and they don't beat themselves, then there's a really great chance of Florida State winning this thing.
It's interesting to me because, again, Coach leaves no tables unturned. She's got a method to madness everywhere you look, and her opportunity to take this team out to Oklahoma earlier this year and play Oklahoma State in Stillwater, to already have faced this OU team at OU, right, in Norman, in that environment. I think obviously it was done with a purpose in mind, and it was, you're probably going to see these teams again at some point, and we need to be uncomfortable for when the biggest stage does arrive. And so I remember that day specifically, those of you looking on the screen, those of you listening via podcast on audio only, I've got Oklahoma beat Florida State 5-4 in mid-March on a trip that the Noles took out there, 4 games against Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. And I remember Katie Dack hitting a home run to go up 4-3 and the stunned silence in Norman as she did it. And yes, Oklahoma ended up coming back to win 5-4, but that was like the day, I think, not that this team lacks confidence, right? Like, not that this team has ever really lacked confidence, but you kind of had a feeling deep down, okay, if we can hang like that in their house against that juggernaut that everyone says can't be beat, I think we've shown that even Oklahoma bleeds a little bit. And so that's going to be important. I think the mentality for this team, not just the humility, but they're not going to be intimidated, Caylin. Like, they're going to be more than ready for this fight and feel like they have a chance to win.
Definitely. I mean, why would they not? They're 51-game win streak, back-to-back, going for a three-peat with the national title, having some of the best hitters and pitchers in the country on their team. They're going to be very, very confident coming into this. And like we previously said, Florida State was winning going into that, fourth inning, 4-3, and then Oklahoma punched back. And then that's where Florida State is going to have to say, okay, like, now we've got to punch back, and you can't let them have the last punch. And but Coach so smart to bring her team out to Oklahoma, get them in that environment, get them playing against Oklahoma in Oklahoma when the crowds are going to be loud. It's going to be a huge deal. getting people uncomfortable, getting those nerves out, so that later on now we're here and they can say, I've already done this. I've been here. We played them already and we almost beat them. We played them really well. And that's building that confidence.
Yeah. Something I found interesting when I went and looked at that box score, everybody pitched against Oklahoma except Mac Leonard. And so I wonder how that factors in. Obviously, if we're bringing it up, Kocha, T-Will, T-Cam, they thought about it. This isn't like some breaking news.
Right.
I do wonder, and that leads me to my next question, not just how does Mac Leonard get used here, but if you're Kocha, who's getting the ball in game 1?
So I think honestly, I think Mac would be a good candidate for game 1 just because they haven't seen her. What does Oklahoma do well? They hit home runs. It's a lot easier to hit a home run off of a rise ball than it is a drop ball, which is what Mac throws. She throws that velo down. So I don't think that going with Mac would be a bad idea. I think it could be a good idea. I think that also maybe bringing in McKenna Reed, kind of like what she did the other day with Tennessee. So you're going hard velo down, then hard velo up, and then going with Allie Dubois with that nasty off-speed changeup and really throwing the hitter's timing off. So you're changing their viewpoint and then you're changing their timing. So I think that could be a really great combination. Also going with Kat, like if you want to secure that game 1 win, starting Kat, going with Kat for as long as she can. And, maybe bringing in somebody, to eat up some innings or to change the timing again, like going with Allie or going with McKenna. So, I mean, she could really go either way. And she always seems to surprise us with what she does, and it always ends up working out. So, I think either way, but if we go back to what our game plan was against them in 2021, she wanted to keep the ball down and away. She wanted to keep it down and away. So she threw Danielle Watson first game. Danielle did fantastic. She was throwing her fastball and her drop ball down and away, and Oklahoma was struggling with it. And they did super well. Or Florida State did super well, hitting wise, and we came away with the win game 1. And so I think that going with Mac could be a really, really great chance.
And I know there were some people that rolled their eyes when I said it because common knowledge would say you go with your ace. It's game 1 of a championship series. And I'm not oblivious to the fact that Kat Sandercock is going to pitch a majority of these innings against Oklahoma, and we'll need to. I think if FSU is going to hoist the trophy, but she has thrown over 200 pitches. I think she's somewhere near 215. And yes, as you're well aware, Caylan, throwing a softball, different on the arm, the stress on the arm than throwing a baseball. That doesn't mean it's indispensable and that your arm
right
out there. And I think some people think, it's an easier natural motion. No, it's still grueling.
You still get sore. You still get really sore.
And so the reason I bring that up is, she's pitched a lot. And they, if this is going to be truly a 2 or 3 game series in favor of the good guys, you're going to have to manage Kat Sandercock's arm, and you're going to have to be able to keep her fresh. Lonnie Alameda has mentioned that she felt like in the past she hasn't done as good of a job of that, of keeping Kat fresh, and that has dropped her velo at times. And so this season there was a renewed focus on making sure that Kat was at her best, right, every single time that she went out. And so the only reason I bring it up, and Mac Leonard has pitched admirably. That's another thing. And the only one that I would be surprised with is I think if Kenny Reed went first, that would surprise me. Although Lonnie Alameda, she's sometimes got a few tricks up her sleeve, right? She pulls rabbits out of her hat. They usually work.
Yeah.
And,
I think that, going off of that, I definitely think that it would be a little bit of a surprise to see McKenna start just because she did start her the other day. And I really think that was maybe more of a test on the freshman to see how she's going to do in this huge environment. And she did well, in the first inning. So, but I think as a freshman, just being young and being in that environment and it all being new still, you feel it's a lot easier to go in kind of as a reliever or kind of in middle of the innings when maybe you're ahead or your offense has already produced a little bit. And then knowing that like you have Cat or Mac or somebody who can come in for you if things do start to kind of go a little crazy. So I know just starting, the nerves, the adrenaline, you're all hyped up when you start. So I think that I would be surprised as well to see McKenna start, but I could definitely see her coming in mid to late innings.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Gut feel right this second. Who is in the circle for Florida State game 1? Who gets the first pitch against Oklahoma?
As you're asking me to go into Coach's brain, which is impossible. If I had to choose, it's not one, but I really think it's either going to be Cat or Mac. I think it's going to be one of the two. I think either Cat starts game 1 or Cat starts game 2. Win or lose. I think Cat starts game 1 or Cat starts game 2. So if they win, because usually what I think is Coach, she wants to lock it down. So you get the win game 1 and then lock it down game 2, similar to what she did in 2021, where she started Danielle game 1, Kat started game 2, did great. We almost won that game. If we would have had a few different plays or a few plays go a little differently, I think we could have won that game. So I wouldn't be surprised if she started Mac game 1, started Kat game 2.
Okay. I think that's what I'm leaning is.
Yeah.
Because Kat started against Oklahoma this year.
Yeah.
In Norman, judging on past tendencies from Kocha, right? Just having observed over the years, she does play the matchups as well as anybody in the game, maybe better than anyone in the game, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to matchups, positioning, heat maps, all of the things that you can think of, she is a wizard at that stuff. I just feel like they haven't seen Mac Leonard. I looked through that box score and I feel like, I'm not saying Mac's going 7 innings. I'm saying I think Mac's going to throw 2 innings.
Yeah.
See how it goes. And Kat's going to be first, ready to go, and then start game 2 as well.
Yeah. I don't think McKenna will go, like you said, more than 2 or 3 innings. Probably not 3, probably more like 2, maybe get through the lineup once or twice. And then honestly, depending on what the offense does, I think is who goes in next, because I could definitely see McKenna coming in next or Allie Dubois coming in next to throw off the hitters a little bit as they come through that second or third time. If it's a really, really close game, I don't know. I don't know if she would go with Kat later. She might go with Kat later and then start her game 2. But yeah, we'll see. It's a mystery.
That's what we're here to do, is to bring up conversation and talking points. And, I guess you touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you pitch to this Oklahoma offense strategically? What's the best way to keep them at bay? Yeah,
so like I said earlier, obviously they hit the long ball really well. It's easier to do that off of a rise ball. So unless that rise ball is like I said, Nigel Kennedy's rise ball, which is 72, 73 and spinning like crazy and way up and out of the zone, which Kenna Reed can do. And so, but I think that going down and away, making it really, really hard to get barrel to the ball for them, and then throwing that off speed to throw, timing off a little bit. I think that's the way that you're going to defeat that offense, and keeping them off the bases. So no free passes, no walks, no hit by pitches, none of that stuff. If they hit a solo shot, so be it. But don't allow them to get that, 2-run shot, 3-run shot.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see who strikes first. I feel like teams against Oklahoma often haven't put them on the back foot and made them come back. Clemson did a good job of that. And Oklahoma obviously showed great mettle to come back, and not saying that they're not capable. I just think you got to make them feel a little bit of pressure. I think all the pressure's on them playing in their backyard to get the 3-peat, keep the win streak going. Florida State should play with house money. This is no one's expecting you to win. And quite honestly, you shouldn't care what anyone else thinks outside of that locker room in that clubhouse. And so, like you said, the culture that Kocha has instilled, that belief, that playing for each other, she does a really good job of making it feel like all that matters is that group, right? Players, coaches, support staff, families. All that really matters in the end.
Yeah, we always talk about it's about the people to your left and to your right. It's about your community. It's about your family. And it's about gate. Give your all to the team every day. Nothing outside of that gate matters. Once you step onto the field, step through the gate, it's all about your teammates and about your staff and coaches. So she does a really great job of doing that. And the girls have done a fantastic job of separating. And then, I mean, you have to be hyped up by the support that we've seen in Oklahoma with Sydney Sherrill and Megan King and Danielle. I know Danielle's on staff, but she's up there supporting. And then the coaches' kids, everybody just going nuts and loving it. And you have to be inspired by that as a player.
It was cool to see Sid Sherrill's family kind of host the team for a backyard barbecue, watch party. They look like they have a really sweet setup out there.
Yeah.
That looked cool.
Yeah.
But to see alumni and administrators and kids and family members all around, that's just kind of what FSU softball is. And you and I were talking about it, right? Like there's this love at Florida State, especially that softball program, that I think is different than when you look around other programs. You've played at multiple programs, so I'll let you touch on it. Just what makes Florida State softball different than everyone else?
I think Kocha and T-Will and T-Cam do a wonderful job of bringing the girls in. And yes, they're hard on us. Yes, they push us to our limits sometimes, but we know at the end of the day that they care about us. They care about us as people. They care about our growth personally, and they care about us and we're part of the family forever. We're part of the Florida State family forever, and so that's a huge difference. And I think, too, the relationships that you create with the Florida State community outside of the softball team, so the boosters and the other alumni and the alumni parents and the staff, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. Like every time that I go back to Tallahassee, I'm greeted with, hugs and people telling me they miss me and how they wish that I came around more. And I'm like, trust me, I wish I could be here all the time. I wish I could still be on the team 100%. But it's so cool. It's so, so cool. And I loved every moment of it. And I love being a part of this Florida State family. They welcomed me in as a transfer with open arms immediately. No one ever made me feel like I wasn't just automatically a part of the family. And that's the difference. You don't get that everywhere. And if you do get that at the place that you're at, then stay. Because I promise you the grass is not always greener on the other side. But I got lucky. And did a lot of research before I just really decided to commit to Florida State. I talked to alumni and, Jessie Warren, when I asked her about it, she described Florida State as going to an amusement park and riding your favorite roller coaster over and over and over again. And I was like, really? I have not heard that before. So that was huge. And then I completely agree with her. It really is. And I think that's the biggest difference. Kocha and the staff, they do a fantastic job of really making you feel loved and wanted and a part of that team.
Yeah, no doubt. And the culture is as important as anything. That makes sure that no matter if your team 36, 37, 39, or 40, right?
Right.
Personnel changes, the faces change, but core values and what you believe in doesn't. And
right.
I think that's how you make it back to OKC over and over again and put yourself in a position to win national titles.
Exactly.
There is a standard and pillars of what a program is about, no matter who comes through that. And Lonnie Alameda probably does that better than anybody in college softball. Last thing I want to ask you, we need to talk about this because I don't know. I will admit that I'm not the softball guru that Caylan Arnold is. She played it in the circle, obviously, and was an all-ACC and an SEC freshman pitcher of the year. So can you explain what we were all freaking out about against Tennessee with the illegal pitches? How was it officiated? And did people have a right to be upset? Because it definitely upset Lonnie Alameda. We saw that on the cameras as well.
Yeah, so it's a interesting situation, I think, last night, just because At this level, there's so many pitchers who throw illegally sometimes, and it's just not called. It's not called. And we either have to change the rule or to where we're going to be calling it every single time no matter what, or we have to just make it legal. And I'm for team legal. I think that pitchers need to be able to compete with these offenses, and so I'm all for making crow hopping legal. But last night there were a couple things that people were saying. I don't know if it was truly kind of figured out what exactly they were calling illegal about Reed. Some people were saying that she was airborne, which is crow hopping, meaning that when she jumped off the rubber, her toe came up off the ground and she was in the air. Your toe is supposed to stay on the ground the entire time. Some people were saying that her heel wasn't staying on the rubber. So you have to have your front foot on the rubber no matter what when you start. You can't move it forward. And some people were saying that she was kind of taking a little bit of a step forward, so her heel was coming off the rubber. I'm not 100% sure which one it was, but either way, they were calling it. Coach Alameda had every right to be upset because there had only been one illegal pitch called on Florida State all year long. So you don't call it on the biggest stage at the very end of the year. If you want these pitchers to learn and to adjust, you call it at the very beginning of the year when they have time to learn and adjust. Now it's too late. They can't. So why call it? It's pointless. Also, like I said, there are several pitchers at this level who do that. People were pulling up videos all over Twitter last night. I mean, they're going back and forth still now about it, but there were several pictures of, Carlin Pickens, her foot up in the air. Ashley Rogers took a step forward. Jordy Ball's in the air sometimes. It's going to happen. Like, it's going to happen. And I think it's ridiculous that, they're nitpicking those things at the World Series. And then if you're going to nitpick it for everybody. Call it on everybody. And they weren't doing that. So that's the situation. And personally, I think that in this champ series, like, if you're going to call it, it better be every single time, and it better be equally called on both sides. So that's going to be what we look for in this champ series is, are they going to call it? If they do, is it going to be fairly called?
And let the players dictate the game, right?
Right.
Like, just let it be goods versus goods. And let's save this for the NCAA officiating seminar that they give every year. When we go to conferences and they say, here are the rule changes, just keep it for the off season. And how hard is that, Caylan, to make that adjustment in the middle of an outing? Like, I mean, what do you even do? Like, can you just change how you pitch on the spot?
Not really. I mean, it's extremely difficult. It is so difficult. Like, we saw the difference, even in having a year to work on, the back foot. So like, Kelly Barnhill at Florida, she was known for crow hopping, and then she was throwing, 70 miles an hour. And then within that next year of her trying to fix it, because she started getting called for it, she dropped in speed. She got down to like 65, 67 consistently. So I mean, it's almost impossible for you to fix that in a matter of pitches because it's a habit. It'd be like telling someone to quit smoking just like that. Like, it's almost impossible. You can't quit something just like that, like cold turkey, especially when that's how you've been pitching for so many years. And if it's only called once throughout the season, why is it being called now? So that's not something that poor McKenna could really change in the moment. And so for them to call it on her 4 times, knowing that she's not able to change it right away, she's going to keep pitching that way. You either call it every single time or you don't call it at all. And so that was the problem, was the inconsistency. So no, that's not something that you can just change on the spot.
I thought she handled it really well too for a young player. And
yes,
I was even making comments like, how much longer can Lonnie Alameda keep her out there? Not because she doesn't think that she can get the job done, but you're asking someone to change how they pitch. If they're going to keep calling it, it's just, you got to go to someone else and hope that the umpire, they just allow it. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's what I was, and we were all confused. And good on her. I thought Kenny Reed showed extreme maturity to be able to handle that. Got the outs to get out of the inning anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if you looked at it, when she first started throwing, she was 69, 70. And then when they called her for it and she started trying to make the adjustment, she lost a lot of speed. She was 64, 65. And I mean, not only was she just so mentally tough, but she wasn't competing at the same level that she normally competes on. And that's frustrating because as a pitcher, when your speed changes, when your spin's not working the way that it normally does. And so it's hard to pitch confidently when you know that. And so I was very proud of McKenna. I thought she did a really great job of staying just mentally in it and trying to control what she could control. And so that was really cool to see.
Not to mention they called Kat for a pitch clock violation. I mean, they were like taking too long. I was like, now we're doing this? UCF's pitcher was taking a full 45 seconds to a minute between. I mean, what is going on? Like it was like every rule in the book was being applied almost like arbitrarily. Like
it's not the time.
I just feel like calling it.
It's not the time. It's not the time. And what I loved was Kat's response. Kat responded beautifully. She looked at Michaela. She said, me and you, they knew what pitch they were going with. She went with it and then struck the girl out. So I thought that was so cool mentally to see her, because that's what it takes to be a great pitcher, is to control what you can control, flush whatever just happened, and then do your thing next pitch. So I loved that. I was so hyped up about that. But yeah, like I think that there are so many rules that after this season, the committee needs to sit down and talk about and say, okay, we've got to redefine this. We need to redefine this. I tweeted about it last night. I was like, we gotta figure out, catcher obstruction. We got to figure out that rule.
I have no idea what it is.
They don't know. They don't know. They have no clue what they're looking for. Okay. So we've got to figure that out. We got to figure out the crow hop. We've got to figure out, the time in between pitches. Are we going to have a pitch clock? Are we not going to have a pitch clock? Is it going to be enforced? Out of the box rule. Okay. When I was playing, it was like, if your toe is barely over the line, you're out of the box. Now we're not seeing it applied as strictly. So, but it still happens every now and then. And I'm like, okay, we're either going to be strict about it or we're not going to call it at all. Like, we've got to really set these lines and figure out what the rules are, because I don't think we know the rules. So those are some things that I think need to be reevaluated.
Yeah, perfectly put. I think that's a good way for you and I to wrap up this episode of Seminole Sidelines. Do you think the Noles can pull this one out? What's your heart saying on this one?
I definitely think that they have the potential to pull it out. I think that it's going to be really hard. I 100% believe that they can come away with at least one game win. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a match. It really is. That game 2, because Oklahoma is so good at adjusting, and Florida State's just going to have to keep punching and never let off the gas. And if they can do that and they just continue to give it right back to Oklahoma, that's going to be the difference. And I think that the reason why Stanford didn't win, was just because they didn't keep punching. Oklahoma punched back, and then that was it. And Stanford's offense couldn't compete with the Oklahoma offense. I think that our offense can compete with the Oklahoma offense. So as long as Florida State can play Florida State softball, focus on themselves, and keep punching, they have a chance at winning this.
I agree with you. Game 1's important to me. You got to come out and take game 1.
Definitely.
That's the one right there. And
yeah.
That's the one where Florida State, I think if you take game 1, now you're talking about splitting with Oklahoma over the next 2 days. And I think that becomes a whole lot more doable than just asking straight up, hey, go win 2 early on. But Caylin, I hope you had fun. Appreciate your expertise, and you're awesome. Thank you so much. I love being on here. Thank you for having me. All right. Well, Florida State and Oklahoma, number 1 versus number 3, can the Noles snap the 51-game winning streak by the Sooners and deny them the three-peat. We'll find out Wednesday, 8 o'clock on ESPN. I want to thank you guys for watching on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to the Osceola or floridastate.rivals.com. And, of course, subscribe to our podcast, those of you listening on demand, as well as our YouTube channel. We will be back on Friday, hopefully with some more softball to talk about maybe and see where the chips may fall. And until we talk to you again, she was Caylan Arnold. I'm Ariya Massoudi.